The Brown Sign Project podcast is proudly supported by Stephen Spencer and Associates. There's reopening, then there's building back better, then there's creating a sustainable future business model. From managing change to customer experience design and brand communication, our innovation toolkit helps visitor attractions and destinations build forward better.
Welcome to the Brown Sign Project, bringing together tourism professionals from around the world to share what they love about the attractions industry and to inspire the next generation of industry leaders. So what are we waiting for? Let's get on with today's episode.
The Brown Sign Project podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Brown Sign Project. We're here on episode 3 with Karen and Lois. They're going to introduce themselves in a second, but you'll all be delighted to hear that most of our discussion today revolves around one of my favourite topics, which is the tensor barrier. And I'm sure Lois has got lots to say on tensor barriers too. If you've met Lois before, you'll know that she has. And Karen, who is joining us, I'll let her explain what her role is and why it's so important that she's here. Lois, hello.
Hello, hi, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're involved in this conversation?
Sure. So I am the head of visitor operations at the V&A. So pre-pandemic, we would usually welcome around 4 million visitors annually. So lots of visitors to kind of move around a very big, very complex historical building. Mostly when we have popular exhibitions or popular Friday lates, that's when, you know, really the kind of the beauty of the queuing system comes into play. But obviously most recently with our kind of post-pandemic or new normal, as it were, we've been doing lots of experiments with queuing and tensor barriers, and I do love a beautiful queue. Anything that just helps to signal where our visitors need to go, what they need to do, where we want to move them, anything to give them a good, solid welcome that leaves them hopefully less confused than when they get lost somewhere in our gorgeous building.
Excellent. I will tell you, I've been lost in the V&A many times. So
I always recommend it. I actually, you know, I love a queue to begin with, but after that, get lost and enjoy.
I was gonna say, there is a particular corridor in the V&A where I have been stuck many times when I did a project there before. And I always get in it and I'm always like, damn, I'm here again. And now I got to go up a different floor. So yeah, I appreciate any sort of wayfinding in the V&A, definitely. And now we have Karen. So Karen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be part of this. This is my first ever podcast, and what better topic than a tensor barrier to discuss during that. So I've been at Tensata just over 3 years now, and I am so fortunate that when I joined, I was given the leisure and tourism sector to look after. Very much more my field over, say, rail or airports, although I look after rail now as well. But the exciting part of me being part of that is I get to visit some of the most wonderful attractions in the UK, including the V&A, which, as we mentioned, is one of our great customers, and we've got some beautiful kit in there, and including, you know, wall systems and some of our standard posts and what have you. And it's just really wonderful for me to go around the UK and be really proud that our product is really helping with that visitor experience from arrival, from the flow on site, and personalising the queue with some beautiful branded webbing to get your visitors super excited about what's going to be happening and what they're going into. And it really helps not only with that welcome and that front of house experience, but their wayfinding going around. And you know, the world has changed somewhat with COVID, and there's been some really beautiful pluses that have came out of it, in that with this one-way systems and social distancing, it's allowed a lot of attractions to get the visitors to see the whole of the attraction, as opposed to darting in and out and missing rooms. So I think there's been lots of pluses that have come out of it, that the barriers have certainly helped with. So really pleased to be here today.
Excellent, thank you. I think one of my first questions is exactly that. So I'm going to pose this question to Lois first, because I think as an overview, but I think Karen, definitely you will have some say on it. Do you feel like the perception of queuing has changed because of COVID? So now, especially when people are booking a lot online, do you feel like queuing is, I mean, whether for positive or negative, is different now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there has been a kind of behavioural shift in how people perceive queuing. I think we have we've kind of had an interesting challenge at the V&A because you know, on a sort of normal weekday, you don't need to queue to get into the V&A. We've got 3 entrances and exits, and it's very much free flow. You come in, you have that warm welcome from our team. We've got some brilliant signage and maps to kind of help guide you around your visit, or as I mentioned earlier, to kind of get lost in the building. Whereas now, I think that, you know, especially when we first opened, people wanted to feel a level of COVID security, and queuing is a really visual way to show that that actually there are measures in place, and whether you had that queue or not, obviously we had measures in place, but it's something that's very visual. We also used them. Again, we have historic floors in the V&A, which are classed in and of themselves as an object, and they're conserved as many of our objects are, and so we didn't really have the luxury of being able to stick signs on the floor either. So we used our barrier systems as a way to say, you know, these barriers are placed 2 meters apart to help you to social distance, and that really helped us. So as a visual in terms of COVID security, absolutely, I think that's something that, you know, people's behaviours have changed around. But I do think that's now shifting. I think that there's now an expectation that things are opening up, and we want to be able to move to a more free-flowing world. Just a sort of personal anecdote, when we sort of first went into the lockdown, I had to queue to get into the big Tesco near me, and I actually found it quite frightening. In a way, it was good because I knew that it was going to be capacity managed inside. But then on the other hand, you know, I've never had to queue all the way down a car park to go into Tesco. It's not really how I want to spend my Saturday, but there also wasn't anything else to do. So as a queue lover, I kind of enjoyed it. But but now I think if we were still seeing that would feel quite frightening to me also. So I think it's a fine balance at the moment.
Yeah, well, everybody knows I love a capacity managed attraction, so I'm all for Tesco's being capacity managed for the rest of eternity, frankly. But I know that I'm in the minority on that one, definitely. And that actually you did sort of make me think of something there, but I'll come back to it. So Karen, if you just want to give us your thoughts on what you've seen, obviously from your point of view, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a bit in the same way that Lois mentioned about the, you know, an historic site where you don't have the luxury of being able to pop stickers down left, right and centre, and nor do you want to, because you don't want that scaremongering. You still want that same feel when you go in there, these beautiful floors, and not feel like you're hemmed in with signage and getting bossed about. So we very much have led with our customers, and we've developed various products, so whereby we've always done branded signage in our webbing belts, you know, to advertise theatre productions or attractions, and that being part of, you know, the first experience. So, you know, a theatre production, and people go and post next to the barriers and get their photograph taken to say that they're going to, you know, this latest attraction that's in the West End. We very much developed that and used that as part of our wayfinding and our COVID strategy in the hands-based space. We put that in our webbing so that, you know, you had that messaging, but it was a very subtle messaging in the queue line without these big signs everywhere. But again, making sure that the guests were aware that they were spaced at that 2 meter spacing. So it was a subtle way of doing it without having these big alarming signs in places. And things like QR codes for your registering, but, you know, we're coming away from that, but registering, being on site, and for those getting those pings for notification and signing in. So that very much helped having that signage aspect as part of the queue line, and it meant that the attractions could get some of that red tape and some of those, you know, wonderful measures that were put in place that made people feel safe, but that could be done in the queue line, so it wasn't all done at the entrance point. And, you know, with capacity planning, and wonderful thing that's come out of it is it's enabled people to have timed attractions and really know who's coming and to scale up and down from a staffing perspective. But having some of those measures put in place within the queue means that the staff are still available to do those lovely welcomes instead of having to make sure that they're signed in, for example. So I think from us, we just developed our range to make sure that, well, what can they do in the queue line to help with that, so that people can just do it as a part of the natural flow. So they're notified about the hands face space and the 2 meter spacing. They can sign in their QR code. We developed a hand sanitizer that fits on top of the 10 stator post, so you don't have to have a secondary post. So that's all part of the flow going in, but making sure that that feels very natural and not creating that bottleneck, even if it is a timed attraction, just so that things can go in as a normalised way as possible. So I think, it's definitely changed, and I think fortunate enough that we've been able to develop our range to support with that.
Yeah, I think also lucky that we live in a country that generally loves the queue. So, any of those people who maybe weren't quite familiar with queuing before, who were maybe, a little bit difficult to deal with when you were trying to queue people into an attraction, actually, they're now used to queuing at supermarkets, queuing to come to your desk to buy a ticket, or queuing to get their ticket scanned, or let's say sign in with a QR code, suddenly doesn't seem such a big ask when you're actually, competing against your Morrisons or your Tesco's or whoever it might be. But you did bring up a great point, Lois, which I wanted to touch on, and Karen picked up on as well, is that it never even occurred to me that you wouldn't be able to put stickers down, because that was, the stickers were everywhere. I mean, we had some, this is kind of off topic, but my husband works for a really big brand of pubs. So when they first closed, we had all the stickers that he was testing for the floor stickers for social distancing when they could reopen. So we had them in our house for a little while because we were like testing them, because we're sad people, it's what we do. And it just never even occurred to me that you wouldn't be able to put those on the floor of the V&A. Yeah, God, I didn't even think about it.
I've seen some places where they've kind of gone just over the top with the amount of that, that hazard tape and the stickers on the floor, where again, it moves from being reassuring into, I think I used the word earlier, frightening. And that's not what we want to do. We want to keep, we need to be able to, especially within the museum and cultural sector, is to keep all of that reassurance. And I think the word now is definitely, it's reassurance, in keeping with our buildings and our experiences, because we don't want to take away from that. And in a way, we are very much an escape from all of these, from whether it's just being in our house 24/7 or not being able to go out, not being able to meet up with friends. So, all of a sudden those in-person experiences became really important. And the last thing that you want to be kind of bombarded with is stand here, go here, in a way that feels very unnatural. And, whilst we are sort of in a way telling people go here, stand here, but making sure that people feel welcome and not like it's a burden, because it was our pleasure to, for so many attractions, it was our pleasure to welcome people back and have our buildings brought to life again. So we wanted to make it as easy and as welcoming as we possibly could.
Yeah, I think as well, it's an interesting point, because I think tourist attractions in general, regardless of what is beyond your door, whether you're a museum or a theme park or, a live animal attraction, whatever it might be, is that there's always been an element of risk. There's always an element of risk. You're in a public building. My first job was working at Madame Tussauds, and it was very much in, a post 9/11 mentality of, any bag that was on the floor was really scary. But we've always managed that risk. And I think it came as second nature to most operations people to continue that anyway, was to think, actually, this is just a heightened version of what we've always done. And so, like you say, just reassuring people, as opposed to, doesn't need to look like the zombie apocalypse. Don't need kind of red and white barrier tape or orange and black barrier tape. It's not The Walking Dead, we'll be fine. But yeah, I do think it's sort of just an extension of what we naturally did anyway. And Karen, you touched on kind of staff and how staff help in that situation. And obviously that's been a huge thing for especially those attractions that maybe haven't always had queues at their front door, like the V&A. But do you think that there is somewhere that we've lost maybe that staff interaction in a queue line? How vital do you think staff kind of we're talking at the moment about customer journey and customer flow. At what point do you think there needs to be a human involved? Because I know obviously you deal a lot with steel and structure and technology. What about those people? Where do you think they belong in that situation?
Very much so. So, I mean, I went down to some of the big free attractions in London recently just to get a feel for the market and see how things have changed and what's happening differently. And, there's always I think you mentioned it yourself, you've always had those checks in place. So if we think about a theatre environment, what needs to happen at a theatre environment? You've got to check the tickets. You've got to make sure there's any age restrictions that are allowed for. You've got your security bag checks. Whether it's a time to action or not. But if you think about a theatre environment, they have a time that they must start because they've got a deadline that they have to finish. So all of those things are still in place, and all of those will have a human interaction, and it's super important because a robot can't check an age restriction, for example, or a security bag element, and all of that. If you've then got the added pressure of checking a QR code, doing a temperature check, and on all of those restrictions that we've had in place that thankfully are now obviously we're moving away from, but all of those do have to have that human touch to it. And when you're going through those, and that they're standard things that you go through, isn't it wonderful when you've got somebody that's got a smile on their face that's telling you a bit about who's backstage or who's in the theatre that night, and giving you a bit more about a museum side of things, interacting with a young child that's there about the latest dinosaur that's on show or whatever it may be. So I think you will never lose that, and if anything, that's more important than ever when you are doing those extra measures. So I think the human touch is massively important. And I went to Peterborough Cathedral, took a Monday off a couple of weeks ago, and I was greeted upon arrival, and they're still doing a bit of a one-way system in there because they're just keeping those extra measures in place. But I had a guy there that was volunteering, and he told me about a painting that was on the wall behind me that I would never have turned around and looked at. I would have followed this one-way system around. So I think that knowledge is what makes your day. And I've remembered him, and I remember the story. And I don't think you can ever put a value on that. I think that's always needs to be in place because it just adds so much to the experience all round, I feel.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I get asked with my consulting head on is people always say, oh, I want to put this piece of technology in place because I want to reduce my human element, and that works to an extent, but actually you're better off just refocusing your human element. Like you said, that actually I don't need a barrier. I can buy a steel barrier, that's fine, but a steel barrier cannot tell people where they can go or what they can do, and all that sort of warm greeting stuff. But yeah, just reducing that human element. And Lois, do you think that that's changed for you, especially kind of COVID? It's not behind us, but you know what I mean, the new normal. In that element has changed in terms of what your people are doing.
Yeah, definitely. So in our kind of post-pandemic structure, we've put in a very specific sales and welcome team, and there is a real emphasis on that welcome. We now, because we are operating with one entrance and one exit at the moment, and we continue to review these operations all the time, it's allowed us to literally say hello to every single person that walks in the building, and to have that interaction, and to be there to answer questions. And exactly, again, as Karen said, now is more important than ever to again have people there that are welcoming, that are giving you information, that are also well informed about what's happening, what the COVID secure measures are, what the current restrictions are, where you need to go to see a certain object, if there are tickets available for certain exhibitions. It makes a real difference. I think as well, interestingly, that whilst we've had, and kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, people are reassured by this kind of visual COVID secure measure. Interestingly, we've also had visitors that don't want to queue and are kind of confused as to why they have to queue. And you need to have someone there to explain, we're monitoring our capacities to make sure you're safe, we're safe, everyone's safe. It won't take long. You're within a 15-minute slot, you'll be in within the next few minutes. It looks long, but we're continuing that flow. And I think it's really important to have people there to just, again, that word, kind of reassure visitors as they come in the doors. And yes, we can put signage up, but then there is so much information that we have to give visitors. It's kind of sorting through what's the most important part that we need to tell them, whilst also balancing that all important hello, rather than it just being just a massive billboard of you can do this, but you can't do this, and we're doing this and doing this. So I think team members and that human interaction is just more important than ever. And there are so many lovely stories that my team tell me about, and how they've seen children grow up, literally over the years of just seeing them come year after year and watching them get bigger and bigger. And people with different neurodiversity, and how they've seen them kind of grow and blossom and have more information or more connection with both objects and people. And we had exactly that after the pandemic, after the really, those 2 really big lockdowns, people coming back and just saying how lovely it was to see people again and staff. It didn't have to be their friend or family. The V&A, like many institutions, to some people it's their second home, and they feel comfortable there and they feel at home there. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, you just made me think, actually. I'm a huge advocate of parkrun, and we'll talk about it till you're all absolutely sick to death of me talking about it. But it's a real community. And we recently went back to our home parkrun after obviously the lockdowns, etc. It's only just restarted. And I was watching this little boy, well, not a little boy, watching this young man run. And I thought, there's something about him that I just recognized. And I realized, actually, when I last saw him, he was a little boy. And he has some physical disabilities in his legs, and he has a running coach with him. And parkrun's one of the things that he does as part of his physio. But exactly that, of going, I can't believe 2 years has passed. And I think, when you work in an attraction where you see the people come and go, it's actually, that 2 years is a big old time for some people, a real big change. But you did kind of hit upon something there, which is my next question, I guess, which is the one about kind of wayfinding and what role that has to play, and sort of death by signage. Nobody wants death by signage, but what do you think in terms of that visitor journey experience, so that, end to end, I come in, I have an experience with you, and then I leave? What do you think kind of role wayfinding has to play in that? So in terms of, like, say it might be a one-way system, it might be pointing different directions. Do you think that has as much of an impact as we might think it does?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the best sort of scenario to kind of think about this, if we think about a theme park, so when you arrive at the theme park, you've got your car park in, and then there's lots of different ways that people can transact. You could be a family that's coming down the motorway and dad's spotted Alton Towers and you want to just pull off, and obviously that scenario you need to buy a ticket. And let's be honest here, no attraction wants to turn anybody down just because they haven't pre-purchased a ticket. All sales are welcomed. So the theme park environment has to allow for those ad hoc visitors that are going to turn up in the same way that any museum or any other attraction would. So we've got your visitor that's turning up on the day. Where do they go? How do they buy their ticket? Where do they need to park? Is it a yellow car park, a green car park? So we can start with signage just in where do you need to park to get the ticket or to go into the attraction. So it really starts from the car park in terms of advising what the next step is. So if they've got to if they've already pre-purchased their tickets, there'll be a certain queue line. If they need to buy their ticket, there might be a fast track machine whereby you might just need to redeem them on the day. Or there may be that attraction that does need that human touch, where you can't just go to machine and buy a ticket because you might have a voucher off of the back of your cornflakes or whatever it is that you're going there, because there's lots of these 2-for-1 offers.
Naming no names there, but there's always a 2-for-1 offer on the back of Kellogg's.
There certainly is. and also how wonderful, because it enables families to actually be able to afford to go to these wonderful attractions. So I think at the car park side is where it really starts, is what is your queue, where is your queue? And the last thing you want to do is be in your prepaid ticket queue and you get there and you do not have your ticket. So that's going to be embarrassing, frustration, stress levels. Nobody wants to do that. So we've worked with, you know, some of the biggest attractions in the UK, and we've done it really simply. So we've got our standard queue post, but we've denoted it with colours. So it might be, if you imagine a cafe banner style, that will create pods, and your pod is your pre-booked ticket. You might have a pod for your group bookings for your schools and those coach, you know, those day travellers. And then you've got those that have had to just obviously buy the ticket on the day. So I think from the entrance, just making sure that's really clear with your signage. And we've done things that we've done for years. Historically, a lot of our bread and butter business has very much been in the aviation industry, and that's very much where we started off. And if you can imagine, you know, somebody, the amount of people that will come off of a plane in a short space of time and need to get through immigration, some of that beautiful wayfinding, that colour coding, that high signage, we're now very much bringing into the leisure industry to make sure that that experience is as painless as possible. So creating some telescopic signs that are higher, making sure we've got clear coloured areas where you would go into your attraction. And then once you're in your attraction, how wonderful, we have fast track. I mean, fast track wasn't about when I was a kid, but I wish it was. And, you know, people are happy to pay a little bit of a premium to get on some of the biggest roller coaster quicker. So then our wayfinding and our queuing can be that fast track queue or that single rider queue to make sure that attractions are at their maximum capacity every time that ride's going out. There might be, you know, a mum or a dad that just wants to whiz on in and have a quick go on her roller coaster, and all the kids are waiting and they're happy to be that single rider. So single rider queuing, fast track queuing. So I don't think it's ever just a one, you know, size fits all in terms of the offering. It's a queue, but in terms of what the product is, how we use it, how it's implemented, you know, in sort of a theme park environment, you've got different floors, you've got block paving, then you go into a ride environment where you can't necessarily screw into the floor, so we might put a magnetic floor plate in. So there's lots of options and lots of different choices depending on the environment and what's needed for there. And so for us, it's really exciting about going through that journey, meeting with our clients and following and doing exactly what, you know, the customer will do on the day or the visitor will do on the day, and walking through. And then let's look at those pinch points. Let's see where it can be a bit of a bottleneck. Let's make it better. Let's streamline it. And something that we haven't sort of pushed on as yet, let's earn some revenue from some of these queue lines. You know, we've had a long time where a lot of our attractions have been closed and they've lost a lot of money. And, you know, there's a lot of charities out there, and how can we make sure that we're getting, you know, making sure we're getting our charity donations as best as possible? And that can be done as some beautiful banners and with QR codes where you can tap to pay and incorporate that as part of that journey. And then once they've came through the attraction, typically we'd have a gift shop of some description. Everybody likes to get their keyring or their mug and their t-shirt and whatever it is they're going to take away from that day. And incorporating in-queue merchandising, you know, your basket spend can go up 30% and you've paid for the system within 3 months in that extra revenue. So it's not just about, it is about experience, and it is about that flow, and it is about making sure that we're doing the best we can, but also it's about generating some revenue from that. And the sponsorship deals as well. So that's a whole nother element to it. But again, that's very much part of our consultancy. When we do that, we make sure that we're covering all areas in the same way that you try and have that guidebook sold at the front of the journey. So I think very much it's a big thought process, and there's lots of products that fit into that.
Yeah, we have a whole episode dedicated at the end of this series to gift shops, so you'd be interested to hear what they say about that, because I mean, you know, one of the first things we said when we did visitor experience kind of mapping and customer journey mapping was, where do we start to break this down? And we, you know, easy one to check off, exit through the gift shop. It's so easy. So Lois, what do you think in terms of, obviously we discussed earlier about your wayfinding has changed and all that kind of stuff, but what's your thoughts on kind of how that affects your visitors and what they're doing and their satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a big complex museum with multiple levels built across several decades. And a few years ago, we implemented a huge new wayfinding system, and we very much thought about it in kind of the way, if you think about sort of motorways and A roads, and if you are trying to get somewhere to a very specific place up north, you don't have that signage immediately from London. You just have signs that say the north, and you follow that road, and then it gets more and more specific the closer you get. So again, I grew up in Devon and I live in London. Everything above that is the north.
Yeah, I was going to say, as somebody that grew up in the north, I take offence to the fact that no, I don't at all. But it's true. I mean, you drive up the motorway and it says the north this way. Where that starts is another matter. But I'll let you have at least the Watford Gap services before it becomes
For
the
me,
north.
it's Somerset upwards.
You're like London. That's in the north to me.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
But that was kind of the idea that we adopted with our wayfinding system is once you come into the building, where are you generally trying to get to, and then how does that break down into the smaller elements as you get further and further into the galleries. So what are the specific time periods or the specific materials that you're after once you get to those bigger galleries. So it's kind of getting people from A to D, but first you need to get them from A to B to then follow that journey on. And of course, people play a really big part in that as well as the signage, as well as, where we make people go. And then in terms of the wayfinding for our post-COVID reality, again, we're operating on one entrance, one exit, whereas before we're very used to having our big grand Cromwell Road entrance is our main entrance, and we've switched that because we have our Exhibition Road Sackler courtyard that has allowed us to do much more with queuing and bring people in. It's a bit safer. You feel kind of, there's a psychology to once you're through the gates, you're not technically in the building, but you're on the premises. So that feels very different to kind of queuing along the road. And we've really seen that behaviour as well. And we made a decision quite early on that, we ummed and ahed about the two entrances and that we would do it from the Exhibition Road entrance. But obviously our signage is more geared towards, there is more of it in our main Cromwell Road entrance, because you immediately see galleries, you can immediately go up floors, you've got two staircases that go down on either side, you've got two staircases that go up, you've got galleries on either side, you've got a shop straight in front of you, whereas Exhibition Road is very much left is kind of cafe, toilets, and actually the exit to one of our major exhibitions. And then on the right is the rest of the museum, the gallery. So you have to start a lot smaller, and there isn't necessarily the space for all of that. And we toyed with the idea of doing one-way systems. I know a lot of attractions did that, and with great success as well. And I know that colleagues and peers of mine have talked about, I think the National Gallery and Tate have talked about keeping some of those trails in place, because visitors really find them really useful. It's kind of a one-stop shop for, I've never been here before, what should I do? Oh, I can follow a trail, and I can see how that be really useful and really helpful. We made a decision quite early on not to do that, because we didn't want to be prescriptive about where people went in the building. Again, we've had however long kind of locked in our houses and without anything to do, and we wanted to give people the freedom to come and explore and enjoy for themselves. And so that's really worked for us, and I think people have felt very pleased to be able to do that. But to begin with, we did need to put in some additional kind of big bits of signage to be galleries this way type thing, and just really trying to signpost and move people into the building. And we're still continuing to review and adapt our operations every week, and the team are really brilliant at giving us feedback on what works, what visitors are saying, what are they asking for, where do they want to go. what's working. So whilst a queue may look really beautiful from above, and we were talking earlier about there's some gorgeous images of the queues that we first put in place, we've had to change those and we've had to adapt them as we get more people walking up. So to begin with, everybody needed to pre-book a ticket. We're now experimenting more and more with having people walking up. They don't need a ticket, and how we accommodate them alongside our members and our pre-book tickets, and that model is changing, so we need to adapt to that.
Yeah, I think that interesting you say about like having like a one-way system. I love the idea of having a one-way system around the V&A, because you would be there for years. Like, you must look at every item before you're allowed to move on to the next item. You would literally be there for the rest of eternity, just going, please let me out.
We have something like something like 7.7 miles of gallery, so you definitely get your steps up. yeah,
you don't sort of want to be forcing people around that in a one-way system, but it would stop me getting caught in one corridor for the rest of my life, so that's pretty much better.
I think when I first joined at Thames Status just over 3 years ago, one of my first meetings was at the V&A, and it was just to review some wall units you had on site. And I sort of planned, I'll nip in for half an hour, go around, check a few of the ends and make sure everything's working okay and give you guys some feedback. And it ended up being about half a day because I had no idea where I was going, what I was looking for. And of course, I didn't even have a map show me where the items were. So that explains, I didn't know it was 7.5 miles, but that definitely explains half of my day and where it went.
Yeah, you probably did a marathon that day, just running backwards and forwards. Excellent. And you touched on something there, Lois, which I'm quite interested in. There was a conversation I first had when I first got into ticketing software about fairness in queuing. So why some people didn't want to have kind of a fast track entry. One of the big things when we talk about getting people to book online, which again, in hindsight now, it seems like madness, because when it was suddenly needed, everybody did it. But before, I used to have arguments with people saying, we don't really want people to book in advance. I think this is insane. Why don't you want people to do that? But they'd say, if they book in advance, we've only got one queue. And so you book in advance and then you stand in the same queue as people who didn't. I mean, and that to me as well is madness. Like, Karen said, you should be able to think, well, I've got my ticket, so I'm maybe not, super fast tracked and always get straight in, but I shouldn't have to stand behind somebody who hasn't even made the decision to purchase yet. That just seems a bit weird. So one of the things that you touched on there was around kind of getting the fairness right about, why am I queuing, whatever. So and you don't have obviously many kind of VIP things, but thinking about like your lates, etc., and accessibility, what are your thoughts on kind of who gets served first and why? And managing that as a head of operations must be quite interesting.
This is such a hot topic because it's so interesting ticketing a free national museum, because there's so many parameters that we had to discuss around that, and accessibility was a huge one. And I think it's something we could never have, obviously we can imagine it, but I don't think ever really would have been a reality, because this is the nation's collection. It belongs to everyone, and you want people to walk up, you want them to come, you want them to decide on the day, I'm gonna go to the V&A today. The V&A is for me and I belong there, and I want to enjoy my time there, and you can come for free and spend the whole day there, and that's amazing, and expand your knowledge and learn about 5,000 years of human creativity and ingenuity. That's so special. And then you're sort of thrown into this dilemma of, but we need to ensure the safety and the comfort of our visitors and our staff, and we need to limit our capacity, and we need to make sure that people are giving us their details, because we need to be able to track them if they then become unwell, and then we need to tell other people, then we need to tell the NHS, and it just grows and grows. And so to begin with, absolutely, we were really strict with our ticketing and making sure that everyone had a ticket, because everyone had to be, and also we'd been thrown into this world of the use of digital and the QR code as the star player of 2020.
Which I will always regret saying. I felt like I was personally overseeing the death of the QR code because I hated it so much. And every time someone said to me, "Oh, it's going up," no, we just it's not needed. And then 2020 came, and I'll never live it down. But I do hate them, and I will still go on record anytime and say they're just really badly used. They're not a terrible technology. They're just badly used. That's what I'm going to say.
Absolutely, you're not alone in that. And I mean, who could have imagined that it's almost like MySpace coming back in a way. Sort of the QR
I welcome back MySpace way before I welcome back QR codes. You know, having a
United.
Oh yeah, I mean. I saw a thing recently that was like, wouldn't it be great if on your Facebook page you could play a song that represented you? And like, it's like, no, you've just created MySpace. That's what MySpace is like. So yeah, I welcome back our old tech overlords any minute now.
Talking about the having VIP entrances and ticketing and people coming first and what have you, it's particularly challenging in some of the central locations. So if you think about, for example, the Shard in central London, they obviously don't own the street where your entrance is to go into there. So we've done a movable signage piece that's magnetic, a bit like a fridge magnet that just sticks on the signage. But they're able to use that for visitors in terms of, when there's a group booking or something, and simply just for arrows for your VIP entrance if they've got, because they obviously use the space for multiple events going on there. So it's for them, the challenge is, how do they get that signage? How do they make sure that somebody hasn't been stood in that queue way back? And having that movable signage was really important to them, because you'd be pretty cross if you're head of whichever bank and it's your event and you're thinking you need to be in this queue, and of course you don't because it's your event. So I think it's always a challenge for lots of attractions, especially in those inner cities whereby you don't have the luxury of being able to have a post that you can screw to the floor. And these big flags are great, but we all know that we're in windy Britain, where and they don't last 5 minutes and they fly over. So I think denoting those areas for those special guests or that attraction and those events is a tricky one, and it's just finding that right product, isn't it, for it, to make sure that you're not removing anybody or upsetting anybody else that is waiting in that queue as well, and it's really obvious why they've gone ahead of you, for example, just to keep the stress levels down a bit in that environment.
Yeah, I think when you can explain to, and this was always my point about, if you want to get people booking online, you have to give them a reason to give you their money in advance. It's a big deal for some people, less so with a free attraction, although then you have things around, what's the value of a ticket and all that kind of stuff. But is that the easiest thing that you can say to somebody is, if you book in advance, you'll have a shorter queue. I mean, that suddenly was blown out of the water, because when 100% of people do it, well, then there isn't a short queue, you're the only one anyway. But yeah, I think in terms of, like you say, being able to say to somebody, actually, that person did book in advance and that's why they're ahead of you, is a more positive message than saying, I'm just, this is unmanaged, this is not really, a thing. And I used to work in an attraction where we were trying really hard. We had a really limited capacity and our queue would be 6 hours sometimes. I mean, just nobody has a good experience after 6 hours. But if you can say to somebody, okay, like, we've reserved you in a virtual queue or however it might work, so that they can go and do something else. And then, if someone turns up, it's, again, that positive messaging around, we're fully booked, we just don't have the capacity for you, is a better message than, actually, you've got to stand here for 6 hours until there's a space. It's just not, it's not conducive to people having a good time. Excellent. Lois, you I can feel you desperate to say something. Go ahead.
No, I it's so interesting. Hearing everything that you guys are saying. And obviously I don't have the experience of working in a kind of a more sort of attraction-based sort of institution, such as one of the big theme parks. And that's where I can see that absolutely you want to you want to make sure that that behavior is ingrained on an ongoing basis, and that's how they act, that's how those kind of attractions are built, with that all in mind. And I think the challenge that kind of museums have had, and certainly with us, is our attraction wasn't built for, you know, especially not for that entry. And as I said before, that free entry is really vital to removing any kind of access or barriers for anyone and everyone, regardless of who you are. And that's so important. And we are now in a position where we're trying to make sure that we balance making sure that our members who, you know, donate regularly to us, they're supporting us through their membership, making sure that they feel special, whilst also balancing that kind of that messaging of, but you can also come if you don't have a ticket. And yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge to try and navigate. And the other thing, just going back to setting behaviors, is if we do start bringing in this kind of either fast track queue or, you know, separate queuing, if we do it once, does that mean we need to continue with that? Does that mean that we need to do it for all of our exhibitions going forward? Is that the behavior that we want to encourage or we want to set with people? Because if we do change that, then is it going to be confusing for people in the future? And will it cause more pain points if we then want to revert it? So I think for us, certainly, we're right in the middle of some of those discussions at the moment. And whilst so many things across museums are very similar, what's really interesting is the different approaches each kind of place has had to these different challenges. And I don't know that there is any right or wrong answer. And I think it's actually incredibly unique to the physical building, as well as all of the different sort of like access and historic and socioeconomic problems that are thrown into the mix.
What that kind of speaks to me of is, you know, there is so much diversity across the way that people approach the same problem, is that actually the thing that I think, you know, no one listening to this podcast, I think, will forget it because we're all in it, is that it's really easy when you look at an institution like the V&A, a museum like the V&A, to think, well, of course they know what they're doing. It's the V&A. Well, actually, yeah, but it's the V&A made up of people just like you and me who are just trying to do their best. You know, they've never been through a pandemic before either. And we just have to have a little bit of grace. And I think actually, generally speaking, people have been quite gracious about it and they are letting us experiment a little bit. But how long that continues to last, I think, will be interesting. I think people are over it now, and I think are getting a little tired. But I also think, you know, that realization that those big institutions are still just people, just doing their jobs, just trying to get on, and, you know, living through the same pandemic that we're living through. And I think it's a good message to round up on. So thank you both. I'm going to ask you if either of you has, because Karen promised us just before we started recording of an exciting Tensata story just for Lois and I, who are obviously huge barrier nerds. So Karen, I'm going to invite you to tell that story now, but also if either of you got anything to wrap up on, and then we'll say our goodbyes. But it's been an absolute pleasure. So Karen, over to you for your Tensata story.
So most people know Tensata, and most people will refer to the tensor barrier as a tensor barrier. And of course, it's a barrier, but we are the industry leaders in that, in the same way that we all have a vacuum cleaner, but one's a Dyson, one's a Shark, but you refer to it as I'm going to get the Hoover out of the cupboard, because of course that was the brand leader. So the tensor barrier is a barrier. There is others in the market. We like to think we're the Rolls Royce of barriers, and we invented the barrier. And I just wanted to give you a bit of history from it, because you know, also a Q nerd and really proud of where I work and our product. The history came, we were a spring business, and the spring business was called Becklawot, and they're still a trading company. And if you think about, in the olden days, there was a window on a train that went down and then kind of sprung back up on its own. That was done with a tensile spring that allowed that movement. And then the industry was very much in the transportation industry and supplied windows for ships, because of course a ship window can't open this way, or because of course it would just close. So a ship's window would open up and down, and it needed to have some form of opening because the windows would steam up and what have you. So that spring invention was used in lots of products, namely the wind-up radio, the wind-up torches, if you've ever done D&V as a kid. So we very much started as a spring business, and as part of that, the Beckler company very much traded within transportation, moving on to in the 60s when passenger aircraft become more viable and people started to go into Costa del Sol and what have you in the 60s, and airlines and passengers started to very much use the airports very much more than it for business senses, because, you know, package holidays become more viable. And prior to the tensor barrier invention, it was rope and post that was used. But, you know, imagine having to put those out and put those away every night. And what's quite interesting is we always lead our product journey, not what we think the market needs, but we follow our customers' needs. And we constantly, every year, I think there's probably 15 new products that have come out this year just off of the back of what our customers have required. And interestingly, that's the bones of our business, in that Beckler supplied the aviation market, and somebody from, it was the original Heathrow Airport, but it wasn't called Heathrow Airport then. It came up to the office and said, oh, you know, you make seat belts, because we were a seatbelt business, because part of the spring went into seat belts. Can you put a seatbelt on top of a post so that it just goes in and out, and we don't have to have these rope and posts which are cumbersome, taking them on and off every night to clean the floors? So it was a case of our customer asked us for a product, we invented it, and the rest they say is history. But in terms of the actual branding name, the spring itself is a tensile spring, and the business at the time very much wanted to go into the American market, and the industry leader in America at the time was called a negator spring, and they wanted a brand name that would be familiar with that negator. So it was a tensile, negator, tensator. That's where the brand name came from, because we were a spring business.
Amazing.
And our logo on our labels that go on top of our post still have Tensator with the spring logo, and that's the copper tensile spring that does the retraction in our cassette.
Amazing. You have to. I feel sorry for the podcast listeners because they can't see our faces, but Lois and I are bonded a little while ago. Well, quite a long time ago now. Again, the dates mess because, you know, the last 2 years really didn't exist, but it was a long time ago, over our general love of tensor barriers and Q lines and so on. I mean, I named my company after Q lines, so it's just, you know, it's quite an honor. But I think both of us were very excited by the fact that we recognized the logo when you said it.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to tell anyone that will listen to me on Wednesday when we open. Guys, gather round. I'm going to tell you a story about this tensor barrier. Tensator barrier.
Yeah. And I think you said, oh, you know, people won't remember the kind of horror of rope and posts. I'll tell you, there's a lot of people like me who, when we started in our attractions, have had the horror of moving rope and posts every night. So we salute the tensor barrier on that ground alone, of not having to pick up unbelievably heavy brass barrier things and attach ropes to them. And they're always red and gold, no matter where you work, always red and gold. But yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you, ladies. And just to indulge my own love of Q lines, and I know Lois was equally as excited when we said we were going to speak to Karen. So Karen, thank you for joining us. It's been brilliant. Karen, if you want to start first with telling everybody who's listening where they can find you and where they can obviously find out more about tensor barriers, because we know everyone's going to be chomping at the bit to get in touch.
Yeah, so we've got a really wonderful website which has got some great case studies to give you some ideas about what you can do. Personally, I would love the opportunity to get out and get away from this office at any notice. So happy to come and visit any of your wonderful attractions. We offer a free of charge consultancy, and we will come and give you some great advice on capacity planning, what you can do differently. You know, we never charge for our layout plans and our ideas and our drawings. So happy to give you my time. Our website is tensator.com. Please follow us on Twitter as well. We always have some interesting facts and what have you going out there. Coming back to some of our, we're actually affiliated with Lawrence Rope and Post because we bought the company because of the history, which goes back to 1851, believe it or not. So we're really proud of that heritage. But we do have some great stuff going out on Twitter. And lastly, I'd love to connect with anybody on LinkedIn, and it's Karen.Richardson if you'd like to look for me.
Good, thank you. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I think I have barriers in some of my attractions relating back to 1851. So some of them just haven't been updated since then. And Lois, where can we find you?
Yeah, so obviously the V&A is their website is vam.ac.uk, so you can pop on there and get tickets to come and visit us, either for one of our shows or for free general entry and come and say hi to our wonderful team. Or you can follow me on Twitter. It's just Lois @Honeywell. I'm the same on LinkedIn. I'm very lucky. I think I'm the only one in the world. There's a Louise Honeywell, and I've got my eye on her, but it's Lois Honeywell.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to more Tensor related fun in the future. Thanks, guys.